exchanges of discussion. Let me commend the organizers. I've been close to some of you Perdana Fellows. I've been part of the process. So when they came to me, I thought, why not? I told them, I know nothing about C-band. What's C-band? So today is about C-band. Morning was very macro, general, global, policy, all kinds of things you learn. I'm here to learn. This is a learning process for me. I'm part of this continuous education process. I've learned and I've been meeting people and I've been doing a bit of work on sustainability. Anyway, we have two very distinguished panelists. Ambassador Rokas, a diplomat, of course, from the European Union. He's been here 5 years. He's going to leave in a few days, I was told. Of course, he's going to leave, by the way. Sad to leave Malaysia, of course. He's been involved in many areas of sustainability, palm oil, a sore point for many of us in Malaysia, and I've been informed that there's a clear path for palm oil. There's a resolution to that in the next few weeks, so he's probably going to share with you about palm oil. But today is about C-band. He's going to tell us what C-band is all about. We're going to start. This is 101, starting from basics. I'm sure many of you are not familiar with C-band. We have Shalom. Many of you listened to what he said this morning. He's been around since COP5. Now it's COP. And Baku is COP29, so it's very young. Many of you were not born yet at COP5. He's with, as you know, with KRI, a very important institution involved in research in many areas, contributing a lot to policy making in this country. I'm not going to say much. I'll come back later at the end. We have 5 compartments altogether. The first part, 5 minutes each. This is a debate, free-flowing debate, not structured. The first part, we're going to give each one of them 5 minutes. The ambassador will tell us what C-band is all about. And of course, Shalom will rebut him. So that's the first round. Second round, there is going to be 2 debates of 3 minutes each. So that's the second part. Third part is Q&A. That's the more interesting part. I would like to commend all of you. Very passionate, very committed. You take the course this morning. A big hand to all of you. It's not very often that you have conferences where people stay until the end. I'm not going to say it won't come, but I'm going to block it. And that's it. Anyway, this is a very passionate crowd, lots of young people. So that's there will be, as I said, 5 parts. The first part is the setting the stage, 2 rounds of debates, 80 minutes of Q&A, and then they'll have 5 minutes each to do a summary, and then I'll come back to the end and give every points to share. Of course, I'll do that towards the end. Okay, I'm not going to say much at this point in time. Over to you, Mr. Rokas.
Thank you very much, Dato Sri. I'm really delighted to be to this event. This is, I think, my 3rd event since I've been in Malaysia on CBAM, which I will explain what it is. I have had perhaps 20 or 30 on palm oil and EUDR, the other jargon. It's very kind of you to tell that I'm an expert. When I arrived here in Malaysia, my then deputy gave me an Excel size bag while I was in quarantine for COVID, 14 days. And I asked, what is this? What is the Excel size? I thought maybe some goodies for me that I'm not allowed to go out for 14 days. 80% was on palm oil. So during the quarantine time, I learned about palm oil. And when CBAM debate started to become more prominent here in Malaysia, in order to become a so-called expert, I received another document of supporting and defensive points of 67 pages. So I can understand and I very much feel the questions, sometimes the worries of our partners around the world of what this type of green regulations and environmental measures that the European Union has taken, what do they imply for their business, their exchanges with the European Union. We are a very important market for Malaysia. The figures that speak out, we have a 2-way trade relation of close to 300 billion ringgit a year, and that is in the absence of a free trade agreement, which if we had it, it would have facilitated a lot more this type of conversation, especially when new environmental laws are coming into place. So, since we have today the possibility to have debate and Q&A, I have and I must tell you a few words about the CBAM and what it entails. First of all, CBAM is the Carbon Border Adjustment Measure, as we call it, or mechanism. There's interesting part of the debate today to see if this is something that Malaysia needs to worry or needs to adapt and how fast. But I will argue that there is no worry whatsoever. I hope that we'll all understand that it's not a disproportionate measure either. Actually, I mean, we will all agree that climate change and, of course, environmental degradation around the world and the loss of biodiversity are among the existential threats that we all encounter today. So the response of the European Union to this was the European Green Deal. I think we are aware of it now. And what it is, the Green Deal is an ambitious strategy that tries to implement our commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change. And we want to move the EU towards a low-carbon, modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy. And that is a motto that leaves no one behind, meaning inclusive and allowing for our people to adapt and be ready for the new technologies, but the idea is also to have our partners around the world doing exactly the same. So CBAM is part of this effort, it's one of the measures. The other is the famous EU deforestation regulation that we have debated very much. So what we want that, I mean, the concept is quite simple. We want to avoid that there is carbon leakage. And what we mean by that is that if we have more stringent, let's say, rules in the EU, we do not want that EU industries, they relocate somewhere else in the world where the rules are not so stiff, they're not so severe, and then they go to another country, they pollute more, and then they import to the EU actually products that they have high intensity of carbon, and that is unfair, not only for the EU, but also for the world, because we are part of all of this together to try to mitigate what is happening now, and all of us, all societies, including here in Malaysia, we want to move towards net zero. So the CBAM regulation is fundamentally environmental measure, and it is a measure that initially consists of only 6 products: cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. And what we want with this regulation is to extend it in a way that it replaces what we have now in place, the European Union Emission Trading Scheme, which we want the EU to complement. Oh, I have to rush. So, I would say that it is already in a transitional phase. It has entered into force, but it will enter into application in 2 years' time. So we have time to adapt. And then from 2026 to 2034 will gradually come into application. Then I would say, and this is important, and I will allow to cut some of your time, but I want to underline that for the importers, there are 3 major mitigating considerations, and everybody should know that. First is that the importers of products whose carbon content has been reduced will need to buy less of these certificates at entry points, or at all. And we have a case, an example in case, which is Sarawak, which produces most of its steel in a green way, so perhaps they have to pay on nothing. The second is that the national carbon price paid by a third country producer, for instance under the European Union emission trading scheme, can be deducted and will be deducted from the amount of CBAM certificates that they have to be bought. So it is equitable. There is no way that you are going to do a double payment. And third, and this is my last point, the CBAM certificates are phased in, as they are phased in, the number of free allowances our EU ETS system will be phased out. So again, I mean, this is a way of avoiding double payments. So I leave this introduction to this, and I'm ready now to
Thank
confront
you.
you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm not too sure whether you understand. Can you show of hands, how many you understand what CBAM? Not too many. So that's why we showing to explain what CBAM is all about. But anyway, we are in Susanna and in the currency business. This is what we call currency arbitrage. Not too sure that's the correct description. Anyway, over to you, Sean, to further expand on that definition. I'm not too sure. I think that it's got to be simplified. I see lots of it's not too many nodding. Anyway, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sri. I hope since there's a concept of carbon credits, I get some time credit for the ambassador eating into my great time. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. And Kado Mesimeri, good ambassador. CBAM, right. Well, let's start off with a anecdote. I think the greatest Greek writer of the 20th century, Nikos Kazantzakis, right? He wrote Zorba the Greek, he wrote The Last Temptation, turned into a film by Martin Scorsese. And he has this incredible epitaph on his tombstone. It says, I hope for nothing, I fear nothing, I'm free. Now, I hope to point out that in a way, on the issue of CBAM, the EU is not free. It hopes to be recognized as a climate leader, and yet it fears foreign competition in terms of imports affecting some of its dirtiest industries. And it is trying to shield them using de facto tariffs, trade tariffs, provided through CBAM. Here's the problem. And I'll talk about history. The Greeks, in a way, invented history by Herodotus, right? Who wrote the histories. Let's look at climate history. The EU is the second largest climate polluter in human history. It is responsible for 16.6% of historical carbon, right behind the US, which is responsible for 25%, 1/4. Malaysia, 0.37%. We're very far behind. And yet, through CBAM, the EU wants to make the rest of us pay. How is that equitable? CBAM, actually, the more I look at it, it's not really an environmental legislation. It's a means to resolve an internal policy crisis arising from how the European emission trading system, the ETS, was managed. Particularly with the very free and very generous allocation of free pollution allowances to the dirtiest industries in the European Union. That should have been subject to pressure from the carbon market to change. But when you take away the pressure to change by giving them free allowances, what is the incentive for them? There has been a lot of domestic outcry within the European Union about the provision of these free allocations, and the CBAM has arisen as a way to resolve this kind of scandal. How bad is it? Well, the European Union member countries gave out more in free allowances than they actually took back in earnings and revenue from the ETS. They gave out, I think, something like 99 billion euros, and they only took back 88 billion euros. Businesses got so many free allowances, they actually managed to sell them off for a profit of about 50 billion euros in total. So the system was broken. And so there was a desire to fix it. I recognize that, I applaud that. But the way that they're fixing it is to punish trading partners by imposing these kinds of charges on people who are importing and competing with these industries, which are basically steel, iron, and so forth. Right? These are industries where they have the highest carbon emissions, and they need the greatest pressure to change. But they're being shielded from competition. And the shielding is just shifting the goalposts. They used to be shielded with free allowances. now they're being shielded with de facto charges on their import competitors. Carbon leakage, this idea that either the businesses move out of Europe to find somewhere with a lower regulation jurisdiction, or that foreign products come and compete with them because they're cheaper and so forth. At the same time, the idea is there that they're coming from a country with higher carbon emissions, right? More embedded carbon there. But the European Union is the second largest climate polluter. In a way, the European economy, the technological heights and the heights of wealth that is achieved, is in effect 200 years of embodied carbon that has allowed them to reach this level of productivity and wealth, and the ability to innovate and change, should they choose to do so, to produce more carbon efficient products. Countries like ours have only been independent for decades. Our carbon intensity may be slightly higher in some cases, but we don't have that same kind of technological wealth, the benefit of emitting 200 years worth of fossil fuels. Neither do most developing countries. Now, if the firms move from Europe to somewhere else, like say Malaysia, how do you tell it's actually carbon leakage? As an ambassador, one of your duties is actually to help European companies move to countries like Malaysia to invest here. How do you know when a company is moving for perfectly legitimate investment reasons, and how do you know it's moving for carbon leakage? It's very hard to tell. In fact, the evidence isn't really there. It's a very intensely debated phenomenon. The IMF in the 2021 paper said there is no clear evidence. There's an empirical paper published in 2018 by European scholars that found for the lifetime of the ETS, up till then, there was no evidence of carbon leakage. Now, the question is, this is one of these is the absence of evidence the evidence of non-existence? We don't know. Carbon leakage perhaps could be seen as a form of blackmail that the dirty industries use on Brussels in order to extort subsidies in the form of free allowances or trade protection. Is my time up? Okay. I will respect the bell.
Thank you. Thank you, Shalom. This promises to be a very fiery BBC hot talk. But I think they both set the stage. Ambassador explained to us what CBAM is all about, why it is important to prevent or reduce this leakage. And Shalom, of course, rebutted that. I mean, this is the EU wants to be a leader in this space, yet they're imposing this unfair tariff against countries like Malaysia, and the EU is trying to fix a legacy problem there for 200 years, and Malaysia is to be independent country. Anyway, I'm not repeating what Shalom just said. This is the first round of debate. Yeah? Over to you, Ambassador. 3 minutes.
3. Such accusation. Oh, we make them bit more.
Friendly fire.
Friendly fire, yes. No, I'm not going to use Greek history, but I'm very happy that you refer to it, since it's the country that I know best. However, I think we all have to agree that the climate emergency is real and imminent. So everybody has to play a role. And of course, there is no one who will dispute, historically, if you go back to industrialization and 100 years, that obviously the EU was one of the biggest polluters. But also, we have to understand that we had very little knowledge of the climate crisis that we are facing today, back 100 or 150 years ago. But that's not the issue. The issue is what do we do now? Because everybody feels, and I don't need to say also what is the effect of climate change here. I didn't even start. Yes. What is the effect of climate change, not in Europe, but also here in Malaysia, everywhere in the world? I will not answer with a technicality, but it's important to know the EU has resumed its responsibility, and in the Paris Agreement, there is a very clear distinction between developing states and developed states, and there is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities and capacities, and it is enshrined in the Paris Agreement. And for us, the EU and its member states, by far, we are the biggest contributor in the world in climate financing, 23 billion euros only in 2023. So we are doing our job. And the fact is that today, the emissions in the EU that have gone dramatically down, and ETS help in that regard. Because you need to make your biggest polluters to find a way to make themselves greener, but also it is that today 70% of the biggest polluters are developing and emerging economies, which is a fact. But I have to say, so that means now we need to find a solution. But we are not going to find the solution by confrontation. It is, we are going to find the solution by creating trusted and long-term partnerships. That's why our measures, they have long transition periods, and also we accompany them, and this is also true for Malaysia, with technical assistance in order for Malaysia and any country to align. Because my last point is, we do not want to collect any tax from Malaysia. We want Malaysia to have equivalent laws and to have, I'm not saying like the EU, equivalent green phasing out or decarbonizing laws that will allow either the government or the industries to produce in a green manner, and then there will be zero CBAM or tax collected at EU and
Thank you, Ambassador. So, climate crisis, we all agree with that. Are you saying that you should forget H3 because you have the Paris Agreement and others? That's for sure to respond.
Okay, thank you. Now, I just want to emphasize, EU is a friend and a partner, right? But we kind of wish you had been, involving other countries a little bit more in the discussion of how you would go about resolving these problems that led to the creation of CBAM. Instead, now you have a whole bunch of countries queuing up to challenge CBAM in the World Trade Organization, and they're very concerned. And one of the missions of CBAM is to promote the idea of carbon pricing. But I question the value of promoting what, to me, and to studies I've read, is a failed policy. Right? The average annual emission reduction due to the ETS in Europe ranges from 0% to 1.5%, right? From this much to that much. It's very poor, and it's largely due to the inclusion of free allowances. They suppressed the carbon price in the ETS to 6 euros. There's nothing, right? Study IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is talking about a carbon price in hundreds of dollars. The latest study that I've seen calls for a carbon price of $1,000. Now, whether that actually be politically implemented anywhere, I doubt. But this is one of the problems of carbon pricing. The idea is you're supposed to find the most efficient, low-hanging fruit. Fine, for the first couple hundred tons, maybe you can get that. But at some point, you got to get to net zero. That means the most expensive carbon needs to be paid for at some point. How is it going to be paid for by a market mechanism like that, where you're giving exemptions and protection? It doesn't make sense. Now, can you find a better solution? I think you can. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, has tried to persuade his partners in Europe to look seriously at what the US is doing in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's scaring Europe, the amount of money that the US is able to mobilize. Right? The problem with CBAM is that, and the UN has studied this, the UN has found that CBAM will result in a net transfer of wealth from poor countries, developing countries, to the EU in the order of about $53 billion. The net effect on greenhouse gases is to reduce global greenhouse gases by 0.1%. It's going to make the rich countries richer. Boost your income by 53 billion, but actually it's not much. You look at the Inflation Reduction Act in its first year, it was able to mobilize $240 billion in new manufacturing capacity in clean technologies. And they did that through, they didn't use a stick, like the ETS is a stick. The thing with the US is because of the Republicans, they hate sticks, so all they got was carrots. They just got tons of tax credits, but the tax credits have been proven effective in mobilizing money and capital. So this is a question about having effective policies. Well, my worry with the CBAM and the EU's evangelism of carbon pricing is that it's promoting flawed policies to us. I think look to thyself first for change.
That's the end of the press round, unfortunately, but go on and on. It has performances have been very poor, according to Sheldon, and he referred to the